So the idea that life in society can be fair is often joked at and ridiculed and assumed that it can never be any different than what it is, and what it is of course not fair. As a society, we have an obligation to make it as fair as we can for each other, because we all want life to be fair, unless of course you're a criminal. So the idea is what is and is not fair. And we can begin that with the assertion that comes from a trial that I did. It was just I went through a stop sign at 1 mile an hour. Said this isn't a good thing to get a ticket at $120, I think it was. The ticket ended up costing $1,000. And going to court, the jury was only allowed to hear one thing, that whether their only decision was to decide if in fact I went through the stop sign or I did not. And they were not allowed to hear what the fine or the punishment was. So fair is determined, of course, by the punishment. What is fair, or what is, did I break the rule? Yes, I did. I went through a stop sign at 1 mile an hour. That was on a back street, and it made no difference to anyone. Looked very carefully. Nonetheless, the case was lost, and that was fine. I went to appeals, where I argued that fair, literally fair, means that the price of the ticket must be considered to be a percentage of the income of the person. Because if the price is the same for a billionaire as someone who lives in poverty, then the law has an extreme favoritism toward the billionaire. It doesn't make any difference to him. Yet, while I was in the court, there was a guy in there trying to protest a similar ticket. And his situation was that he was going to, if he had to pay it, he was going to lose his apartment. He didn't have the money for the rent if he paid the ticket. He was that poor. I don't know what his case turned out to be. But the reality is, again, what is fair, and what is fair means that the price of a traffic ticket or any other consideration of what is called law, which actually rules, any other consideration of the rules means that the actual reality of the situation needs to be justified or considered, and the reality of the situation with regards to a penalty that is financial needs to be appropriated according to what the income or the wealth of an individual is, so that the punishment can be fair. It is not fair if it does not involve the same kind of results for you as it does for me. In other words, as is consistent with the man in the court there that said, he's going to lose his apartment if he has to pay this. That is not the same as a billionaire who never even notices that the money is gone. It's completely irrelevant. Not fair. So in that case, I said to the appeals court that you have to, I had to pay $400 and some odd for the transcript to be typed for me, and then if I had not asked for it in an electronic file, they would have charged me to redo it in an electronics file, even though they had the file. They refused to transmit the electronic file to the next court up from the county court. They refused to transmit it for less than $200 and some odd, an electronic file, just an email, push a button, 2 seconds it takes, all done. Demanded $200 and some odd for that. I refused, saying the Illinois Constitution says justice shall be free. That's what the Constitution says, and you don't have a right to change it. So they refused, and because I've been through this process in numerous courts before, the fact that they are corrupt doesn't make any difference. You know, if they have control over the situation, they have control, and there isn't anything you can do about it. So they say. That's the situation of how things don't remain fair in society. People get power, and they use power to corrupt power. And then the whole society suffers accordingly. So, what is fair requires us, as a democracy, to ensure that our courtrooms are in actual fact a place where justice is formed. Justice is the decision that we should all be treated equally. In other words, if this is fair for me, it is fair for you. And if it is not fair for you, it is not fair for me either. And there is no purpose in, no justification in making someone an example. Everything must be equal. Equal is the ability to know that all of society gets the same thing as me. So, you know, this is our reality, and we can judge the judge. Judges do not have a lifetime appointment. They don't. There is no constitutional validity of that. The Constitution says they may remain as a judge during good behavior. When they have corrupt behavior, they are to be removed. And that was an inference from the Constitution. But it's also a necessary validity to the fact that we cannot sustain our society, we cannot sustain our democracy without justice. Everything falls apart unless we sustain fair play for each and every member of society so that everybody doesn't get mad at everybody else. And particularly those who are called the government. There is no such thing as the government. The government is the Constitution. That's what united us. That's what we agreed upon. This is how our society shall be run. This is what we require our employees to swear they shall in fact obey these rules we place before them in constitutional law. Or we will take them to court and fire them and punish them because they did not obey their oath. That's the basis of democracy. That we have agreed upon a certain format for our society. The Constitution has a preamble that spells it out quite clearly what the purpose of this society is or should be, the direction we must choose to sustain our society as we intended it to be, and none of that is being done. None of it. In fact, everything that the preamble of the Constitution says we must, in fact, support and defend is being thrown aside. As is in the case of most courtroom trials, tyranny is treason. It is that simple. Tyranny is treason because all tyranny works and acts to destroy the nation itself. You can't have power players corrupting life and society, discarding the law, which is the Constitution. The Constitution is the basis and the foundation of every law in this United States. There are no laws that do not comply correctly to the Constitution. If they do not comply correctly to the Constitution, they are not laws. They are outlaws in an attempt to undermine and destroy the nation. So, you know, we have a choice. We really do. We have a choice. We can function as a democracy which means that we defend ourselves by creating the laws that we need to defend ourselves with. I have to do it ourselves. We can't just vote for someone to vote for me because it is not working. We must create the laws that we will use as a society to defend ourselves by ourselves. We can do that easily, or more correctly, we can do that, the actual fact of doing it is very simple. The agreement about what those laws should be, however, is a little more complex. They need to be plain and simple and fair to all, because that's what we all going to live by. You know, the laws are what put us in jail or keep us out of jail. The laws are what gives us freedom or not freedom. The law is what gives us equality or justice or everything that we require, or it does not. And laws can be corrupted, and they are. You know, a politician, he has to have money, so they say, to get his job. Well, you got to get the money from somewhere, and those who give money expect a return. Ask any rich man. His investment is supposed to bring him a return. And it does, which is why the laws and the tax codes and all the rest are as they are. Fair in a tax code is that we will, disband the IRS completely. That's how taxes must go. We disband the federal government IRS completely, and for that matter the state government IRS, and reduce it to individual community accounting. You know, the community has an IRS that they vote for, that they live with, that they work with, and they collect the money, and they are responsible for distributing that money back to wherever it goes and so on. And then we can fire them. If they don't do a good job, we will vote them out, and that gives us power over the IRS. Doesn't mean you don't have to pay taxes. It just means that we have power over the IRS by asserting that we have some control here. It isn't you get every powerful thing and can do anything you want, which is what the IRS does, and I have several cases to prove that. They are corrupt and act in corrupt ways and do corrupt things and fail society miserably. Because they to gain taxes, they use power and manipulation, and that just corrupts them, and they just, the roller coaster is all one way down. Once you get on it, the roller coaster just goes down. It doesn't go up unless you force it up. So we have to force them up, and as far as the tax forms go, they are not fair either. A 1040 long form is as complicated as it is because that is on purpose. And the purpose is to confuse you, to create things you don't understand, so that the IRS official can then come in and say, I gotcha. The entire long form 1040 is a rat trap intended to make you confused and make you errant. It is in no way has to be that way. They did it on purpose. And that is a sure and certain sign of complete corruption and complete discard of all things that are respectful to society. They chose against us and made it happen. And the whole tax code is like that. So we throw out the entire tax code, and every industry makes its own tax form. Agriculture has its own tax form, mining has its own tax form, people have their own tax form. We select the tax form that works for us. And if someone tries to put in something that should not be there, we will punish them for that. In other words, instead of being a fair tax for all, if you try to screw us, we're going to make your taxes 10 or 50 or 100% higher than they could have been. and would have been had you not tried to cheat. And so the tax is then done. That's all there is to tax. Fair is fair is fair. You don't have to do a lot of thinking for that. Fair is fair is fair. It ain't hard. We need to take control over our lives and our society and our nation and straighten this mess out. And of course the mess is compiled as a result of those who are in charge. Those who are in charge are the university-led coalition of people who are, or believe they are, superior to the rest of us, and they create traps. That's what an intellectual does. It's not smarter than you. It's just, I can make a trap, or I can see a trap coming. That's what an intellectual is. So the people who are prone to making traps are and have been in charge. We don't need people to make traps for us. There are enough traps in life and society, and in nature for that matter. We don't need more traps. We need to straighten out the people who made traps and throw them in jail or whatever it is that we need to do. That's a choice you can make. But you cannot simply keep avoiding everything that life requires you to do. You must actually make a decision that you have to support and defend society as a democracy yourself. I understand it seems complicated, and I understand it seems you can't do it because, in fact, media takes that from you by propagating the idea that only the university can make a decision. Only the university knows anything. Only the university is God. Or, and of course, the religion of the media and propaganda and government employees is that the university knows everything. After all, they spent all their money there. They corrupted and made a nation bankrupt by going to the university. And unfortunately, they know little and do little and collect $1 million more than you anyway. Not fair. Not fair at all. But that's another whole part of currency and how we realign currency to the population count. Once we know how much currency there is in a nation, we simply select the amount that's going to be the average for us all, and we know if you get a little more or you get a little less, or what is fair. Fair is realistic because time is the one equalizer in all of us. We only get so much, and whether you work on this or you work on that or you work on the other thing, it is your time that you invest, and you only get time as a life. In terms of accounting for it, there are possessions to be had and so on, but time is the element of life. Your decisions, your freedom and so on matter, as do they matter to everybody else, but time is what gives you the ability to exist or to choose. If you don't have time, you don't have a choice, you're dead. So, time is the important factor, not so much work. And but of course, not everybody earns the same, because not everybody is able to do the same. So you have to be respectful of that. So fair is that we have to take away the ability of those who are in government as our employees. They're not government, they are our employees. We need to take away their right to make a choice for us in taxation, perhaps, certainly in the ability to create debts for us. They cannot make debts for us anymore. They have done the damage, and now we are bankrupt, and we have to fix that. We can't fix that unless we remove the problem. And the problem, of course, is banking and politicians and those in power who want more for themselves, and to do that they take it from us. They've been counterfeiting for decades. Counterfeiting is hidden inflation. We have been inflating as Americans, our government officials, those who are the elite, have been creating inflation in the form of $20 trillion a year for the last 8 years of the Obama administration. I'm not sure how much before or after, but $20 trillion a year in inflation. That's a lot of inflation. It's $10 trillion is $10,000 per 100 million people. It is a lot of inflation. But it's hidden. And the media reports to you, well, it's only 1 or 2% of inflation for the nation. Well, that just ain't so. It's an absolute lie. It's a cover-up. And that's the truth. So that ain't fair either. So we need to take from media their right to make any statement that they want to. We need to discard entertainment in media and remove it from the idea that this is news. You may not present news and entertainment. You may not. You may only present news, and we must, as a people, pay for the news that we get. I suggest that www.justtalking7, the number 7.info, I-N-F-O, for information site, would be a good place to start. Because, we have to gather the news, we have to know the news, we have to accept that the news is realistically evident as true, and we have to investigate what are the consequences of being wrong. These are not entertainment issues. These are realities of life and our survival. So, it's a case of, what do you want to do? Really, what do you want to do? Do you want to save this earth? Do you want to save our future? We cannot save our future unless we make the choices that will become a future for us. We cannot keep using resources at the rate we are using them. The stock market says that the current or past resource uses is in 10 years we use more resources than in all of human history prior to our day. How long do you really think that can continue? Take a look at your garbage dumps. It's not a good place to mine. Every decision you make, every decision they lead you to, is a tragedy coming. All of the fire that we use, and that includes the generation of electricity, that includes your car, all of it requires oxygen to burn that fuel. And we are using more oxygen from the planet than the planet releases. So our percentage of oxygen, which is very critical to our lives, is dropping at the upper atmospheres. And it will soon be a case of, we're living on the mountaintop at sea level. It will be only bad. And that, of course, is true for the population increase, which is over 100 million more mouths to feed than last year, each and every year. We can't survive that either. We can't survive the people who are trying to ignite atoms on fire. The sun is in nuclear fire, as is plainly evident, and that is what they're trying to ignite here on Earth. And they will. The machines are running. It's only a matter of time. Sooner or later it will happen. The Bible has a prediction for that. It's in Daniel 12. It starts with the greatest abomination men can do, and the greatest abomination men could do would be to ignite nuclear fire here on Earth. If it doesn't put itself out, as they predict, and it won't, then atoms on fire means that atoms are on fire. Gee, what do you think will happen then? Atoms on fire. Do you think we could become a sun? And of course that destroys every life, destroys the planet, and makes a change to the solar system itself. There is literally no greater abomination than that. There is no greater abomination than that. And you can understand what the consequence of that fire will be. You can do that. Just like you can understand the consequence of adding 100 million more mouths to feed every single year. You know what the outcome of that will be. You know it. It is not a game. And you can't hide from it because it's just going to jump out and scare you at the end. It's going to take your life and there will only be cannibalism left. And it will take every other life on the planet. You can't do it. You must face the reality of our lives, and we must make the decisions that are required of us. And everybody runs away. I know, I don't like the idea either, but I have spent a lifetime saying to you that you cannot avoid the threats that these people are making on us. We can't, or we all die. And I don't like to lead you. This is somewhat leading because I just, can't avoid it anymore. But the reality is, what we need to do is examine the threats, determine what we cannot let go wrong, such as is mutilating nature itself through genetics. And we must find the truth for ourselves. And one of those truths here is something that, all women are attacked with the idea that, heart is, that's the killer of women. Well, just ask them why old age doesn't kill anybody. Why doesn't old age kill anybody? And then you'll find the answer. Well, yeah, okay, so so old women die. Possibly from a heart attack. Well, old people die. And that's a necessary fact. Or the population rises to the point where, we consume the entire planet, and then there's nothing left for life itself. It all dies. If the individuals don't die, the whole planet dies. The future dies. The children die. It's not a game. It's not a game. Democracy is our choice. Matters. Democracy provides in the constitutional First Amendment the right of redress of grievances. Redress of grievances means, literally, that we can combine ourselves together, we can organize and unite together and demand that our employees shall make an account of themselves and determine, we will decide by the evidence if they have in fact obeyed their oath of office. And if they have not, we have the right as a society, voting together, to determine what their punishment should be. We have the legal right to do that. The U.S. Supreme Court refuses to acknowledge that trial, and a secretary of the court dismissed 2 cases that were directly speaking to redress of grievances. They can be found on a couple of sites. The primary one for that is www.justtalking2.info. The number 2. So you can look there. It's down the page a little bit. I think it's in red. You have to click a link. But anyway, our democracy is intended to remove as much power from government as possible, or more correctly, from government employees as possible. To do that, and of course the insurgency is to take as much power from the people as possible to give it to themselves, who become the leaders. That's the fight, and that's the corruption, that's the insurgency, and that's the tragedy, and so on. But the power of most society is money. But money does nothing more than provide a tool to make something happen. It isn't money that is the problem. It is excess money that is the problem. By creating limited capitalism, which is the fact that, by our own vote, we can determine, we have to control the currency first. This is it. No more by population count. No more debts just because you want them by government officials. And then by determining for ourselves what the medium income should be, what the bottom income will be, and what the maximum income for any individual can be, we then form our own alliance to take power as we the people to control our society ourselves. Without excess money, you cannot organize great numbers of people to do what you want. Without access to excess money, you can't organize armies of any size. Controlling the money by making a decision to vote on what the maximum and the minimum incomes can be gives us power over our society. No more billionaires, and no more millionaires, and by our own vote we can determine what the maximum possessions or property can be allowed. In other words, one person can own the whole damn state. They have to share. That is democracy. Democracy is, what is best for the people themselves, and what is best for the people themselves is that you should share. It doesn't mean everybody gets the same. Everybody does not contribute the same. We don't owe you anything if you don't go to work and contribute something. We don't owe you. But, if somebody contributes way more than the rest, they should earn way more than the rest. But there's a limit. And by determining what that limit will be, we then determine what our lives will be like. You have to re-vote on that every 10 years or so, because if you don't, there will be people who manipulate the system so that they can, gain more than they should. It has to be reset up for a vote every 10 years or so, or 12, whatever you want. Anyway, these are some of the fundamentals of life in a fair society. These are some of the fundamentals that are required of you just to survive, because, the extreme experimentation that is genetics, and just because you give your money to medicine, so you think that is not where it goes. It goes to genetic manipulation because they want to play God. That's all they do. They want to play God. There's a tiny few who actually work for life or believe they were working for life, but it doesn't work out. It's like the people who are, oceanographers or so-called protecting land creatures. Well, when they, if you look at an oceanographer, well, we're studying where the tuna go so that it can be protected. Well, it's not protected. When you know where the tuna go and the tuna brings you a lot of money, that's where you go to get them, to fish for them. They're protecting their job by providing whatever the power wants, and of course the power wants to get the money. Simple as that. There is no other conclusion. The ocean's in trouble. Everything's in trouble. Everything is in trouble. If you don't start fighting for your world, you absolutely will not be able to save it. Oh, and as far as the Bible goes, the predicted date that starts with the first experiment from the first machine that could ignite nuclear fire on Earth has already occurred. That was on April 1st, April Fool, 2012, which they fully expected to have a nuclear fire at that moment, and did not. But that was the starting date, or when the great abomination rises, and from the first 1298 days, which is the Book of Law, it mimics the Book of Law. The law could have saved us, is what that means. And then there's the the second death, which is 1335 days later, which is mimics the book of the New Testament, which is about mercy. God can save us if we change ourselves a little bit. And of course that ends, by my calculation, and I could be wrong, but it ends by my calculation on July 9th, 2019. And if you go by that biblical prediction, then hell begins July 9th, 2019. And it lasts, the Bible prediction is there will be a time, times, and a half a time. So the first time is the Old Testament mimic, and the second times is the New Testament, and then the half a time takes 1335 days and divides it by 2, which gives us 667 days and a half. So hell will be, according to that, 666 days long. Then there will be a day for judgment, and then there will be a half a day for whatever happens to those who have been judged. That would be the biblical statement of how much time you have. And of course, that's they're trying to create nuclear fire each and every day, and that fire can be ignited at any time. It is not fusion. The National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories in San Francisco has already proven it's not fusion, and they didn't have to. They tried to create fusion, but they couldn't do it. They gave up. And there is no fusion on the sun. Fusion, they say, is 2 hydrogen atoms being combined into a helium atom. Well, that means there's a lot of helium being formed. That's the equation. 1 + 1 = 2. Or 1 + 1 = helium. There is no helium. It's one of the rarest elements out there in the universe itself. That would not be so if every BTU from the sun made helium. It's an outright lie among the many fantasies they have about the sun. They are trying to kill us. And for that matter, they are trying to destroy the entire planet to kill us. It is just, there are threats surrounding us. If you don't finally wake up in some form or fashion and ignite the reality of your brain so that it actually, works somewhere down the line, and, make a choice for life, for your child, for your future, for your everything. If you continue to refuse, well, hell is coming, and you won't enjoy it. The constant human reaction to every threat and every problem in society has been the same throughout 40 years. We will wait and see. I appreciate that theology in its own self. The reality of consequences that are so wrong that our world becomes extinct. As is the case of a mutilated life, or a population we can't feed, or a nuclear fire. If we cannot be wrong, we can't wait and see, because there are no second chances. When you know these things have happened, the world is itself dead, because we cannot correct them. We cannot fix nature that is genetically mutilated. We can't put out a 10 million degree fire, a nuclear fire. We can't remove any fuel from that. And once the population has grown so large we can't feed it, nature itself will become extinct. And, that leaves you with world war. And all the things that all of that means. You actually must literally, stop the process of destroying this earth by making different decisions on purpose, changing yourselves, because it is humanity that is the entire problem we face. We are the problem. And to save ourselves, we must change ourselves. It literally is that simple. You cannot even say people trying to ignite nuclear fire are no different than the people who are trying to create an atomic bomb. Because an explosion is very, very different than a fire. You know that's true. Once a fire, just like on the sun, is ignited. And there are machines running, trying to do that every day. Once that fire is ignited, it cannot be put out. Your scientists are depending upon fantasy elements, saying that there's something inside the sun that's 15 times heavier than lead. There is no proof of that. The gravity on the sun is from the fire, and I have explained that. To release the energy of an atom, as is consistent with what the fire is on the sun, we know no other energy like it. It is nuclear. To release that, the force in an atom, the outward force, or the force pushing outward, in an atom that we know exists because of an atomic bomb, has to be broken apart from the force that keeps it contained within the atom itself. If there wasn't a force that kept the opposite force from pushing out, there would be no atom. You have to have a balance to create an atom, and that means you have a force going out, such as the atomic bomb proves, and you have a force that pulls in, or otherwise you can't control the force going out. It's like tie a rock to a string. When you twirl it around, it has force, but if the string breaks, or if the anchor that holding the string fails, the force of that rock goes out. Anyway, explaining gravity, solar gravity to you that's as simple as I can make it. And your scientists are gambling our entire world, our future, and even the solar system on the idea of fantasies. But literally just plain stories without any suitable physics involved. They just want what they want. And they bet our whole world on the idea that there's some kind of fantasy element that's 15 times heavier than lead that makes the sun work. Doesn't exist. Nothing on earth proves it can exist. Nothing. This is life or death for our world. Take an interest. 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 take an interest, 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 take an interest take an interest, 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 take an interest.